Dragon Age The Veilguard, o novo jogo, o quarto game da franquia tá chegando e a IGN faz, como sempre, aquele preview porque eles estão tendo acesso ao jogo, né? A gente já viu outros vídeos também referente a eles. Eles costumam ser bastante sérios nessa parte e quando um jogo não agrada eles falam. Vamos ver se esse é o caso ou não aqui, Aleptecos.
É verdade, mas antes da gente ver qual é que é desse game, mais uma vez, uma cobertura enorme que a gente tá fazendo do Dragon Age, você está no Combo Infinito.
Sejam bem-vindos a mais um vídeo, já seguem a gente, já seguem o nosso canal, já seguem a gente nas plataformas também, redes sociais aí pelo mundo inteiro. E a gente vai acompanhar agora esse gameplay com, né, opinião aí da IGN. Pode contar, Lê.
Bora lá? 3, 2, 1, vai!
It's been 10 long years since Dragon Age Inquisition, and the expectations for the next game in the series, Dragon Age The Veilguard, seem impossible. A full decade, a bevy of behind-the-scenes changes, and an interesting start to its marketing campaign made me a little worried for my most highly anticipated game of the year.
I admire you. What you've been through would break most people.
But one of my biggest concerns, based on early previews, was that it could be headed in the direction of being a linear action game rather than its more open-world predecessor. While Dragon Age is known for changing its style with each installment, I hoped dearly that it wouldn't lose too much of the DA DNA I fell in love with. After hours of hands-on time spread across 2 days, I'm pleased to say that I walked away with excitement and curiosity, but mostly relief to wave many of those concerns goodbye.
2 dias.
Quisera.
Como é que é?
Quisera eu.
São hands-on
My
de
time with
verdade.
the Veilguard covered a wide smattering of things, including the incredibly expansive character creator, the introductory quests, a faction mission, and a companion quest a little deeper into the game. But I was mostly pleased with my ability to just explore Northern Thedas and all its gorgeously designed glory, experiencing a setting in Dragon Age lore that we've really only heard about. To be clear, the Veilguard isn't the open-world playground that Inquisition was. As game director Corinne Bush has previously stated, it's more mission-based. But what impressed me after the first few hours was how much exploration can still be done in the various regions, as well as the impact the player character, Rook, can have on those regions.
And there we go. Easy. Wow, isn't that something?
Consider it something of a mix of Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, the more streamlined approach of the former with the geographically and socio-politically diverse world of the latter. Of course, some of the bigger art style, combat, and gameplay changes will be subject to personal taste. But after my time with the Veilguard, I left feeling like these 10 long years just might have been worth the wait. As fans have already seen from the first gameplay trailer, players are dropped right into the city of Minrathous in the middle of the action as Solas prepares a ritual that will devastate Thedas. Luckily, our old friend Varric has recruited you to help, and it barely takes a couple of minutes for the game to put the focus on Rook. After a surprisingly concise story recap from Varric, there are a number of aspects the Veilguard starts easing you into. For one, the combat. Gone are the days of Dragon Age Origins' more CRPG-inspired tactical system, offering a style that's a mix of quick action and a mechanic where you can pause and pull up your radial menu. While this absolutely does take some getting used to, and it'll be a gradual process to create what could be a highly customized build while learning all your companions' different abilities, it didn't take me long to actually start having fun with it. I largely played mage and rogue builds during my hands-on time, and also quickly started to lean on certain companions' abilities. For one, the mage healing ability was essential. For one particularly difficult remnant, I basically established a pattern where I was only using Balara's mana to heal me, dodging and playing it safe when it got too risky. Nev's ability to slow time was also one I kept returning to, offering a bit more control on the battlefield when the situation got a little too fast-paced. And for you glass cannon builds out there, you'll want to have a warrior around to taunt your enemies out of your way.
I did it, Davrin. No problem.
Like a whole lot in the Veilguard, combat revolves around your companions, even though you can't fully take
Pra mim o
control of them
combate é
like
o mais
in
legal.
previous Dragon
Eu
Age
vejo muita
games.
gente nos nossos vídeos reclamando do combate.
É.
Different companions have different combo options together, and there are certainly opportunities to build team synergy. Oh, and you'll want to listen to your companions in combat too, as they'll occasionally drop some useful hints.
Hitting us from range.
But combat aside, your dialogue choices, your rook's background, and the frequent decisions you make are immediately important,
personagem que eles fizeram
which
ficou bem
shouldn't be
louco.
too surprising for fans of BioWare games. The dialogue wheel is back, of course, as is the approval-disapproval system.
We haven't got a lot of time. Varric said you had a lead on Solus?
You get right to the point.
But I was surprised to see that the Veilguard actually explains the consequences of some of your dialogue choices in very clear terms.
See, you say that.
It's a variation of the so-and-so will remember that system, but more specific.
But we do have Nev's location now, so...
Take, for example, my first confrontation with Solus, aka Fen'Harel, aka the Dreadwolf. I chose a more sarcastic, humorous approach with him, and at the end of our confrontation, text on the side of the screen informed me that I have traded verbal jabs with Solus.
This is your responsibility now.
It was far from the only occurrence of this sort of text, and it leaves me curious as to how your relationships with various characters will build and branch out over time based on your attitude.
Isso é uma das
Speaking
coisas
of
mais legais
consequences,
do Dragon Age que eu
it
tô
quickly
jogando,
became
essa
clear to me
relação
that
dos
there would
personagens.
consistently be tons of choices in the Veilguard that'll have lasting results. It probably sounds like I'm stating the obvious here, but I got the sense that even more of these kinds of choices might be peppered throughout than the usual BioWare game. Right at the beginning, for instance, I made a choice that led to Harding getting injured, and she was still bruised up for the remainder of the next couple hours. I felt like a real jerk about it, and that was probably the point. Dragon Age the Veilguard seemed to be telling me, right from the start, that I'm going to feel like a jerk a lot.
You don't slow down for much, do you?
Without spoiling too much, you'll also be able to see some of your progression and choices in the environment around you as well. But once introductions were out of the way, it was time to explore the wide world of Thedas and see its past and present collide.
Shall we?
Let's do this.
As mentioned earlier, one of my biggest worries was that the Veilguard could end up being more linear in its approach, trading branching gameplay for a straight line. And sure, the opening hours, essentially the tutorial zone, are a little railroady, save for a couple key decisions you have to make. But once you're past that and more established within Act 1, you're much more free to tackle quests as you please as you unlock more and more regions. You do this via the Crossroads. For those of you who aren't brushed up on your Dragon Age lore, that's a nexus between the waking world of Thedas and the metaphysical realm of the Fade, through which the ancient elves would travel through magical mirrors called Alluvians. You now use the Alluvians for that same purpose, and to unlock new regions, you have to fight through certain areas of the Crossroads before you can start fast traveling to them. Unlocking said regions opens up a vast network of areas, and not unlike past Dragon Age games, they're dramatically different from one another.
As the gods' champion passed freely, so will you.
Take, for example, the Arlithan Forest, a gorgeous, colorful region that mixes greenery with elven magic. You can see nugs burrow into the grass, magical artifacts abound, and there's a vast array of nature to simply admire. You're hit with a
mostrando
massive
inimigos
tone
novos aí,
shift,
tá ficando
however,
cansado
when you
já
head to
dos mesmos.
Hossberg.
Sim.
Lavendel Village.
Eu ia falar isso, pô, sempre a mesma personagem, parece que é o mesmo B-roll pra todo
Currently
mundo,
under
ninguém
siege
pode
by the
mostrar
Blight,
nada.
here is where you'll see some of the more horror-inspired aesthetics, and frankly,
cenário que eles
just
estavam
some
de
of the
mago, agora
grosser
com
aspects
guerreiro.
of the Blight. While the Veilguard's tone certainly leans more high fantasy in places like the Crossroads, don't worry. Those who miss the gore and dark fantasy of Origins will find that too in places where the Blight has spread.
War não vai achar, né? Porque não tem sangue
But I
direito.
couldn't help but spend a lot of my time just running around in Treviso, the
No Origins,
bustling
os
city
caras
that's
ficam
home to
cheios
the
de sangue
Antietam
na
Crows
cara quando
faction.
você
For one thing, a lively city feels like a novelty in Dragon Age. But there was simply so much to explore that I kept getting sidetracked. A merchant with unique items here, a new quest to pick up over there, and a random combat encounter over there. And that's just when I wasn't looking around for a cat or dog to pet. Because yes, you can pet the cats and dogs. Outside of the cats and dogs,
Cachorros e os
there are
gatos
some
não ligam
unique
se eles
ways
têm
to
pé.
interact with the environment as well. Each companion has an environmental ability, some of which came in quite handy for me. In my time in the Arlithan Forest, I
Se
frequently
sua
called upon
guarda.
Balara, whose environmental ability allows her to tinker with magical artifacts. In a nice quality of life feature, your companions don't even need to be in your party in order for you to use these abilities. As an aside, another one of my favorite quality of life additions is the fact that party banter pauses and picks up again later if you trigger combat, a cutscene, or anything else that would interrupt their dialogue. That's right, no more awkward standing around in order to hear the complete conversation.
Oh.
Yes.
If you're feeling overwhelmed, the difficulty and accessibility options do allow for about just as much or as little hand-holding as you need. For example, with one Antivan Crow's quest I was doing, I could turn the navigation on and simply follow the game's guidance, or turn it off and look for clues in the environment to follow. In this case, the crow's purple symbol painted on certain walls.
Another mark this way.
I also just happened to be playing an Antivan Crow Rook while completing this quest, which led to some fun dialogue options.
We crows are all the army Antiva has, but it's not like we can field a garrison.
Once I was in the thick of things, I could clearly see the features in the Veilguard that boiled down to, okay, we heard the complaints about Inquisition, specifically addressing the infamous Hinterlands problem, which is a reference to the first open world area players visit in Inquisition. The zone was packed with more than 50 side quests, many of which boiled down to mere fetch quests, and it left many players drowning in a bevy of checklists that felt inconsequential to the story. The Veilguard has boiled this down quite a lot. You're still free to explore, but the scope isn't nearly as dizzying, and the quests point back to the main story, a region or faction, or a companion. Another clear reaction to criticisms of Inquisition are our villains in the Veilguard, Elgranon and Gillenane. The two elven gods feel much more present throughout the events of the early game than Corypheus, the frankly lackluster baddie of Inquisition.
Whatever comes, we're ready for a fight.
Words easily said, but rarely proven.
While there's a whole lot more Thedas to see and talk about, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it back home to the Lighthouse. The Lighthouse will likely be the most important location of the Veilguard, serving as the hub for you and your companions. Each one of your companions has their own room, and conveniently, a light shines outside of their door when they have a cutscene available. Once you get further into Act 1, it certainly starts to feel more lived in, and you can discover some pretty charming character quirks. For example, I found that Emmerich's skeletal assistant Manfred enjoys spending time on the balcony, and we even got a few games of rock, paper, scissors in. The Lighthouse is also, obviously, where you're able to do some housekeeping, especially when it comes to the caretaker.
Offer, dweller. I will answer.
This wildly helpful spirit is always standing by to help you enchant and upgrade armor for you and your companions. But I found the Lighthouse somewhat symbolic of one of the biggest challenges this game is facing, bringing in new players while honoring the now incredibly vast lore that Dragon Age has built across the games, comic books, short stories, and more. Basically, if you were worried that the name change from Dragon Age Dreadwolf would mean less Solas, think again. His history, along with the history of the other elven gods, is baked into the Lighthouse, and you learn more and more about the threat you face as you unlock Solas's murals with various wolf statues. You even get to see some of his memories firsthand.
They need gods who can protect them.
We are not gods. You will learn that.
As a lore nerd, I very much appreciated this, as well as the various other callbacks to series history. The Origins fans will likely love the Grey Warden heavy quests, and we already know the Inquisitor will be involved in some way, as you can recreate them and select your world states in the character creator. But I do wonder if it'll overwhelm new players, which BioWare certainly seems to be courting with its action-heavy combat system. That's why it helps, at least, to have something of an outsider like Rook to take the helm of the Veilguard. Plus, the scrappiness of Rook reminded me a bit of playing as Hawke in Dragon Age 2, rather than the more Chosen One-esque protagonists of the Warden in Origins and the Inquisitor in Inquisition. In short, a lot's changed in Dragon Age the Veilguard, but there was so much I was relieved to see stay. The focus on companions and romance, the rich lore, and a gorgeous world to explore. It goes without saying that there's still a ton of the Veilguard that I haven't seen, especially if it's as big as Origins and Inquisition, and it certainly seems like it. But after finishing my preview, I found myself even more eager to dive into it, and much more hopeful that this could be the hit BioWare needs.
Tá aí o preview, inclusive gostei do preview pra caramba, assim, essa pessoa que tá aí falando no preview, não sei quem é, que eu acho que eles mostram no começo aqui. Alex Stadman, Senior News Editor na IGN, deve ser alguém que manja do jogo pra caramba, mandaram ela, né? Gostei pra caramba. Opa, peraí que eu deptei o céu da tela aqui sem querer. Gostei bastante do que ela trouxe. Venho dizendo, já devo estar ficando chato já de falar, porque eu tô gostando da experiência. Eu não esperava gostar da experiência de jogar um Dragon Age do jeito que eu tô gostando. Ainda mais sendo um jogo tão velho, né? E aí, quando eu vejo a Morrigan, por exemplo, eu acho mó da hora. Então eu acho que quem já tá ligado no jogo, vê o Solas, na franquia inteira, vê o Solas, e vê ela falando do Inquisitor, do Inquisition, que tem o Inquisidor, eu achava que tudo ia girar em torno dos Grey Warden, que é o protagonista do primeiro jogo. O estilo de personagem do protagonista do primeiro jogo. Mas parece que não. Então o universo do Dragon Age abre pra você poder jogar com outros tipos de personagens. Então eu tô bastante curioso. Tanto que eu não queria nem jogar esse jogo agora. Eu queria deixar pra jogar ele depois de jogar os outros, pra poder ter a experiência completa, que eu gostei muito. Mas eu acho que quem não tá gostando, talvez não tenha percebido, e é uma coisa que eu tô percebendo cada vez aí que eles falam, inclusive quem faz os previews, que cada Dragon Age é de um jeito. E parece que é o que a BioWare tá fazendo, né? O primeiro jogo é muito bom, ele é muito sanguinolento. O segundo jogo já é mais questionado e ele parece seguir a mesma vibe, mas com um combate mais dinâmico. Aí vem o Inquisition, que já é um jogo mais bonitão, mas também não parece ser tão pesado, tão sujo quanto o Origins e o 2. E vem esse que já tem um gráfico mais até meio desenhado em alguns aspectos. Mas o gráfico nesse tipo de jogo tá longe de ser o que mais importa. O que mais importa é evolução, combate,
Não
essas
só o que
classes e
mais
tudo mais.
importa, mas não é ruim.
E não é ruim,
Eu
exatamente. Eu também não acho ruim. A gente que tá
eu en
fora da franquia achou da hora, né?
eu entendo a galera reclamar, porque gostaria de algo mais próximo ao, sei lá, o primeiro que eles mais gostam, não sei. Mas, pô, você falar que esse gráfico tá ruim, não, talvez seja difícil aceitar essa mudança, mas, mano, gameplay do jogo aparentemente tá muito bacana, e é um dos que eu mais quero jogar esse ano, e não duvido nada de ser um dos grandes concorrentes ao GOT.
Eu também
Vamos ver
acho.
como é que ele vai se sair, né, claro. Mas olha, é um dos que estão na briga aí. Acredito que estará na briga.
Também acho que deve ser um concorrente ao GOT aí. Ainda mais com esse mundo tão detalhado, né? E se os caras souberem usar, porque a gente tem que lembrar que a BioWare não é a mesma de sempre, né? A BioWare tem ali ainda bastante gente ligada aos projetos clássicos, mas as grandes mentes meio que foram saindo. Algumas voltaram. Então aí é onde mora a expectativa da galera. Comenta o que vocês têm a dizer, a gente se vê no próximo vídeo. E tem bastante vídeo de Dragon Age aqui pra vocês. Valeu!
Valeu!